A poor woman left flowers on a grave every Sunday for 5 years, until a black limousine pulled up, and a man in an expensive suit stepped out, his cold eyes narrowing as he approached. "That's my wife's grave, too," he said, voice like steel cutting through the cemetery silence, sending chills down her spine. Rain fell in soft whispers across the forgotten corner of Detroit's oldest cemetery, droplets catching on Jennifer's eyelashes as she knelt before the simple headstone, carefully arranging fresh daisies against the cold marble. The distant rumble of the city seemed worlds away from this quiet sanctuary, where she came to speak to someone who would never answer. The man's shadow fell across the grave, his presence commanding attention without effort, the unmistakable aura of power surrounding him like a dark cloud. "5 years I've had men watching this place," he said, his voice softer now, curiosity replacing anger. "And every Sunday, rain or shine, you're here with those same flowers." Jennifer stood slowly, her worn coat and muddy boots, a stark contrast to his immaculate appearance, her fingers clutching the remaining flowers like a shield. "I owed her," she whispered, years of guilt weighing down each word, her eyes never leaving the name etched in stone. Caroline Preston. The cemetery air grew heavy with unspoken questions as the man, Jack Preston, Detroit's most feared but never convicted crime boss, studied the woman's face with growing intensity. Something about her eyes, the particular shade of hazel flecked with gold, stirred memories he'd buried alongside his wife. "You have 1 minute to explain why you're visiting my wife's grave before my men escort you somewhere less pleasant," Jack said, nodding toward 2 figures standing beside the limousine, their stances revealing concealed weapons beneath tailored jackets. The cemetery suddenly felt like a trap closing around her. Jennifer's heart hammered against her ribs, her mind racing through impossible escape scenarios as rain began falling harder, nature itself responding to the mounting tension. "I was the nurse who held her hand when she died," she finally answered, the partial truth burning her lips. Jack's expression flickered with surprise before hardening again, his gaze shifting between Jennifer and the grave, as if connecting invisible threads. "Caroline died alone in a hit-and-run," he stated flatly, challenge evident in his voice. "No nurse, no hospital. She was dead on impact." "That's what they told you because that's what you needed to hear," Jennifer replied, surprising herself with her boldness. The secret she'd carried for half a decade suddenly threatening to spill out like the rainwater overflowing the cemetery gutters. The truth was far more complicated, far more dangerous. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating their faces in harsh white light. 2 strangers bound by a woman beneath the earth, their connection deeper than either yet realized. The flowers in Jennifer's hand trembled, petals dropping onto the muddy ground between them. "Get in the car," Jack commanded. Not a request, but a statement of fact, his tone suggesting consequences for refusal that would extend far beyond this rainy afternoon. His men moved forward, their intentions clear as thunder rolled overhead. Jennifer glanced at the exit gates, calculating her chances, and finding them non-existent. Jack Preston's reach extended far beyond this cemetery, beyond Detroit itself. "I have a daughter waiting at home," she said, her voice barely audible above the rain. "And I have a daughter who cries at her mother's photograph every night," Jack responded, unexpected emotion cracking through his controlled facade, revealing the wound that 5 years had failed to heal. "She deserves to know who you are and why you're here." The remaining flowers slipped from Jennifer's fingers, landing atop the grave as she made her decision, walking toward the limousine with rain and tears mingling on her cheeks. Sometimes facing your past was the only way to secure a future, even if that past was wrapped in lies. Jack followed a step behind, his mind racing with possibilities, suspicions blooming like dark flowers. This woman's appearance was too similar, her connection too convenient, her timing too perfect to be coincidence. The truth waited somewhere between their shared secrets. The limousine glided through Detroit's rain-slicked streets, passing abandoned factories and gleaming skyscrapers, the city's dual nature reflecting the complicated history connecting its 2 silent passengers. Jennifer stared out the tinted windows, mentally mapping their route, realizing they were heading downtown rather than to the notorious waterfront warehouses. "Pearson Towers," Jack stated, breaking the tense silence as the vehicle approached the city's most exclusive address, a glass and steel monument to wealth rising 60 stories above Detroit's revitalized business district. "My office occupies the top 5 floors, my residence the penthouse, somewhere more private for this conversation." Jennifer's reflection stared back at her from the window, fear visible in her eyes despite her attempts to mask it, her mind racing through the limited options available to someone trapped in a predator's domain. The truth might save her, but it could just as easily become her death sentence. The private elevator ascended with disorienting speed, the floor numbers flashing upward as Jennifer stood as far from Jack as the confined space allowed, feeling his occasional glance like physical contact. Each floor marker represented another opportunity to speak, to explain, each passing in silence. The penthouse doors opened to reveal breathtaking luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Detroit's skyline, rain tracing elegant patterns against glass that overlooked a city Jack controlled through legitimate business and shadowy connections. Even in her fear, Jennifer couldn't help but be awed by the contrast to her tiny apartment 20 miles away. "Why did my wife die alone?" Jack asked without preamble, pouring amber liquid into a crystal glass without offering one to Jennifer, his back to her as he stared out at his domain. 5 years of questions, of searching for answers, and now you appear with flowers and secrets. Jennifer moved slowly toward the window, maintaining distance while gathering courage, her reflection ghostly against the cityscape, the woman she'd been, and the woman she'd become superimposed against Detroit's glittering lights. "I was working overtime at Detroit Memorial that night," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. The ice in Jack's glass clinked as his hand tightened, the only indication that her words affected him, his control almost supernatural in its completeness. The official report stated she died instantly on Jefferson Avenue. No hospital, no witnesses, just another Detroit tragedy. The driver who hit her panicked and called his brother who worked hospital security, Jennifer continued, each word carefully chosen, aware that inaccuracy could mean death in this rarefied air where Jack Preston made his own justice. "They brought her in through the service entrance, no records, no witnesses, except me." Rain pounded against the windows with renewed fury, the storm outside matching the one brewing inside as Jack turned slowly to face Jennifer, his expression unreadable, his eyes scanning her face for deception. "You expect me to believe in coincidences?" he asked, voice dangerously soft. "I expect you to believe in fear," Jennifer replied, hands clenched to stop their trembling. Her career, her freedom, perhaps her life balanced on this conversation's edge. "They threatened my daughter if I reported what I saw, and by the time I gathered courage to come forward, powerful people had already crafted the official story." Jack moved with surprising speed, suddenly close enough that Jennifer could smell his expensive cologne, could see the faint scar along his jawline, evidence that his rise to power hadn't been without resistance. "Yet you visit her grave every week, risking exposure. Why?" "Because she woke up once before she died," Jennifer whispered, the secret finally escaping after years of silent cemetery confessions, "and she made me promise to protect someone named Lily. I assumed she meant your daughter, so I watch from a distance, making sure she's safe." The glass shattered against the wall, crystal fragments catching city lights like fallen stars, as Jack processed her words, his legendary control fracturing for the first time in years. "My daughter's name is Alice," he said, voice like ice breaking in spring, dangerous and unpredictable. Jennifer backed away, instinct overriding reason, her shoulder blades pressing against cold glass as understanding dawned with horrifying clarity. "Then who is Lily?" she asked, though the answer was forming in her mind, puzzle pieces falling into place with terrible precision. "Lily is Caroline's sister," Jack answered, his voice stripped of its earlier menace, replaced with something more complicated, confusion threading through certainty. A man realizing the foundations of his understanding were built on sand. "She died in a car accident 3 years before Caroline, or so I was told." Jennifer's knees threatened to buckle, the weight of revelation pressing down as memories realigned themselves into new, terrifying patterns in her mind. "My daughter's name is Lily," she whispered, the truth expanding between them like smoke, impossible to grasp, yet impossible to ignore. The penthouse seemed to shrink around them, the space between past and present collapsing as Jack studied Jennifer with new intensity, seeing beyond superficial similarities to bone structure, to mannerisms, to genetic echoes that couldn't be coincidence. "How old is your daughter?" he asked, already calculating possibilities. "She turned 5 last month," Jennifer answered, watching realization dawn in Jack's eyes, the timeline aligning with painful precision. 9 months after Caroline's supposed death, a new life entering the world carrying secrets neither adult had suspected. The flowers at the grave suddenly held new meaning. Thunder rattled the windows as Jack crossed to his desk, unlocking a drawer with practiced movements, withdrawing a photograph in a silver frame that had been hidden away from daily view, but never forgotten. Without speaking, he handed it to Jennifer, the glass surface cool against her trembling fingers. The photograph showed two identical women in their 20s, arms linked, smiling with the carefree joy of those who believe the future stretches endlessly before them. Caroline and Lily, twins separated not by death, but by secrets that had metastasized into lies that shaped 3 lives now connected in this tower. Caroline wasn't just my wife, Jack said, his voice hollow with emerging truth. She was my conscience, the only person who could pull me back from darkness, who made me believe redemption was possible even for someone with my history. The confession hung in the air between them, unexpected vulnerability from Detroit's most feared man. Jennifer sank into a nearby chair, the photograph clutched to her chest, memories flooding back of Caroline's final moments, of whispered pleas that now made terrible sense. She knew she was dying, knew there wasn't time to explain everything, she said, each word carrying the weight of years of misunderstanding. Rain streaked down the windows like tears as Jack moved to a sideboard, opening a hidden panel to reveal a safe, his fingers working the combination with practiced ease. Caroline left letters, dozens of them, to be delivered after her death. They never reached their destinations. The contents of the safe spilled across the glass table, envelopes addressed to Lily Reynolds with Jennifer's former address, intercepted by Jack's men in their quest to protect him from perceived enemies, the truth buried beneath layers of misplaced loyalty and fear. Destiny had found another path through cemetery flowers and Sunday rituals. Your men have been watching me for years, Jennifer realized aloud, cold fear replacing earlier shock, the implications cascading through her understanding of seemingly random moments. Job applications mysteriously rejected, apartment applications approved without credit checks, the constant feeling of being observed. Jack nodded once, unapologetic yet troubled, a man accustomed to controlling his environment, confronting the unintended consequences of power, wielded without complete information. Protection and surveillance are often indistinguishable in my world, he admitted, pouring 2 drinks this time, sliding one toward Jennifer. The storm outside began to recede, distant thunder marking its passage across Detroit, as Jennifer opened the first letter with shaking hands, Caroline's elegant handwriting bringing her voice back from the grave. My dearest sister, it began, confirming what both now suspected, the truth more extraordinary than fiction. Jennifer read aloud, words tumbling into the penthouse air, building a bridge between past and present, between the living and the dead. Caroline's confession of using her twin's identity to escape an abusive relationship, of falling in love with Jack despite his reputation, of discovering her pregnancy coinciding with her terminal diagnosis. Jack stood motionless by the window, silhouetted against Detroit's skyline, his empire spread before him suddenly meaningless compared to the revelation unfolding in his sanctuary. She never told me about the baby, he said, voice barely audible, the words carrying 5 years of lost fatherhood. I need to see her, my daughter, Jack said, his voice strained with urgency as he reached for his phone, years of missed birthdays and first steps suddenly crashing down upon him with crushing weight. Where is she now? Jennifer placed her hand over his, stopping him mid-dial, maternal instinct overriding everything else. You can't just burst into her life as a stranger claiming to be her father, she reasoned, her voice gentle but firm, the nurse in her emerging to handle this emotional trauma. The night deepened outside the penthouse windows as they formed a tentative plan, 2 strangers bound by blood not their own, navigating impossible waters. Jennifer described Lily's favorite books, her habit of humming while drawing, her serious questions about stars and oceans. Jack listened with hungry attention, absorbing every detail about the daughter he hadn't known existed, occasionally asking questions that revealed his own childhood had lacked the warmth Jennifer had created despite limited resources. The contrast between their worlds couldn't have been more stark. Caroline knew she was dying when she came to Detroit, Jennifer explained, reading through more letters, piecing together the truth her twin had fragmented to protect those she loved. She wanted to make amends with you before the end, to explain about Lily. The letters revealed a complex web of deception. Caroline and Lily had escaped their abusive father together, creating new identities, separating for safety with plans to reunite once they'd established secure lives. The car accident that supposedly claimed Lily had been fabricated to throw off pursuers. Morning light began filtering through the windows as they reached the final letter. Exhaustion and emotion etched on both their faces as Caroline's last wishes became clear. She wanted Lily to know both her parents, to have your protection without being consumed by your world. Jack moved to a small bar cabinet, retrieving a velvet box hidden behind bottles, opening it to reveal a delicate gold locket with a miniature portrait of Caroline inside. "I had this made for Alice, so she would know her mother's face," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Jennifer's phone chimed with a text from her neighbor watching Lily, reality intruding into the bubble of revelations. She needed to return home, to prepare her daughter for changes no 5-year-old could fully comprehend. "She has your eyes," Jennifer admitted softly, showing Jack a photo on her phone. The child in the image had Caroline's smile, but Jack's penetrating gaze, a perfect blend of parents who had never had the chance to raise her together. Jack stared at the photo, memorizing every detail, his empire suddenly insignificant compared to this new treasure discovered. "My enemies can never know about her," Jack stated, the businessman and crime lord resurfacing as he considered threats and contingencies, protection strategies forming with practiced efficiency. "The moment they discover my daughter, she becomes a target, a weakness they can exploit." Jennifer nodded understanding, having witnessed enough of Detroit's violent underbelly during her hospital work to comprehend the danger. Caroline had kept this secret to protect Lily not just from Jack's world, but from those who would use her against him. The wisdom of her choice was painfully clear. "We need time to introduce her gradually, to build trust," Jennifer insisted, gathering her courage to establish boundaries with a man unaccustomed to limitations. "She knows you as the man in her mother's stories, the prince who loved her mother but couldn't save her." Jack raised an eyebrow at this sanitized fairy tale version of his relationship with Caroline, but recognized the value in preserving a child's innocence as long as possible. "And what role do you play in this arrangement?" he asked, the question layered with unspoken complications. As dawn broke over Detroit, casting long shadows across the penthouse floor, Jennifer and Jack reached an uneasy agreement. A fragile alliance formed around the child who connected them, bound by promises to a woman who had loved them both enough to orchestrate this moment from beyond the grave. 3 days later, Jennifer sat across from Jack in a private dining room at Detroit's most exclusive restaurant, untouched food growing cold between them as they finalized details of their arrangement. The contrast between her simple dress and his custom suit embodied the gulf between their worlds. "My lawyers have drawn up these papers," Jack said, sliding a folder across the table, watching Jennifer's expression carefully as she reviewed the documents. "Legal guardianship shared between us, generous financial provision, and complete identity protection for both of you." Jennifer's fingers trembled slightly as she turned pages filled with clauses and conditions, the legal framework for integrating Lily into Jack's life while protecting her from his enemies. "You're offering to move us into a property you control, with your security watching day and night." Outside, spring rain tapped gently against the windows, the city lights blurring into watercolor smears, as Jennifer considered implications that extended far beyond legal terminology. This would change everything. My job, Lily's school, our freedom to come and go without scrutiny. Jack leaned forward, his voice lowered despite the room's privacy, intensity radiating from him like heat. "Freedom is an illusion when you're vulnerable," he stated, decades of hard-earned survival wisdom evident in his tone. "My enemies are always watching, always waiting for weakness." The waiter appeared briefly, retreating quickly at Jack's dismissive gesture, leaving them alone with decisions that would reshape 3 lives irrevocably. "I won't let Lily become a pawn in whatever game you're playing in Detroit," Jennifer said, meeting his gaze without flinching. Something flickered in Jack's expression. Respect, perhaps, or surprise at her boldness despite knowing his reputation. "The game, as you call it, is already being played," he responded, sliding his phone across the table, displaying surveillance photos of Jennifer and Lily at the park. Horror washed through Jennifer as she recognized the images were taken just yesterday, the implications clear. Others had noticed her cemetery visits, had connected dots Jack's enemies were assembling into a dangerous picture. "These weren't taken by your men," she whispered, the truth evident in his grim nod. "The Coletti family has been watching you for weeks," Jack confirmed, taking back the phone, his casual movements belying the deadly seriousness of the situation. "They don't know who you are yet, but their interest means they suspect a connection to me." Jennifer closed the folder, mind racing with impossible choices, caught between danger that had found her despite years of caution and protection that came with golden handcuffs. "What happened to the men who covered up Caroline's accident?" she asked, the nurse's intuition connecting invisible threads. "They disappeared shortly after her death," Jack answered, the euphemism hanging between them, his expression revealing nothing while implying everything. My grief sometimes manifests in unfortunate ways for those who've wronged me or mine. The restaurant continued its elegant evening service around their private drama, silver clinking against fine china, champagne flowing for celebrations unrelated to the life-altering negotiations occurring behind closed doors. Lily has a recital next week, Jennifer said, changing direction abruptly. Jack processed this apparent non-sequitur, understanding dawning as she continued explaining that the dance performance represented an opportunity, a neutral, public setting for their first meeting, a chance for Lily to see Jack without pressure or expectations. "I'll be there," he promised, unexpected emotion threading through his voice as he contemplated seeing his daughter perform, experiencing a normal parental milestone most would take for granted. No security visible, nothing to frighten her or draw attention. Jennifer nodded agreement. Decision made. Despite reservations still churning beneath her composed exterior, sometimes protection required compromise, sometimes love demanded sacrifice. Lessons Caroline had understood when setting these events in motion years ago. The elementary school auditorium buzzed with excitement, parents clutching programs and flowers, saving seats with jackets and purses as Jennifer settled nervously into a chair near the center, her eyes constantly scanning for Jack's arrival. The normalcy of the scene felt surreal given recent revelations. He appeared precisely 5 minutes before the performance, alone as promised, dressed in a suit that, despite its obvious quality, somehow helped him blend among the other fathers rather than stand out. Their eyes met briefly across the crowded room before he took a seat 3 rows behind her. The lights dimmed as children filed onto the stage in costumes of varying complexity. Lily among them in the butterfly outfit Jennifer had stayed up late finishing, sequins catching stage lights as she searched the audience with serious determination. Jennifer waved, pointing discreetly toward Jack when Lily's gaze found her. Something magical and terrifying happened as Lily spotted Jack. Recognition flickered across her small face, not of him personally, but of something familiar in his features, perhaps the eyes she saw in her own reflection, a connection that transcended their physical separation. She smiled tentatively before focusing on her performance. The children danced with endearing awkwardness, some forgetting steps, others performing with solemn concentration, parents recording every moment on phones and cameras, preserving memories of childhood that passed too quickly. Jack watched motionless, absorbing every movement his daughter made. After the performance, Jennifer navigated the crowded reception area, Lily's hand firmly in hers as they approached Jack, who stood slightly apart from the chattering parents, his usual commanding presence softened by uncharacteristic uncertainty. "Lily, this is Mr. Preston, a friend of Mommy's." Lily studied Jack with the frank curiosity only children possess, her head tilting slightly as she processed this introduction. "You were at my mom's funeral," she stated with startling directness, the statement freezing both adults in momentary shock. Jennifer recovered first, kneeling beside her daughter with gentle confusion. "Sweetie, what do you mean?" she asked, exchanging alarmed glances with Jack, who seemed equally perplexed by this impossible knowledge. "Not you, Mommy," Lily explained with the exasperated patience children reserve for adults who don't understand obvious things. "My first mom. I have her picture in my special box, and he's standing next to her wearing a black suit just like now." Jack crouched down to Lily's level, maintaining careful distance while fighting visible emotion. "You have a picture of me?" he asked softly, his voice lacking its usual commanding edge, replaced with wonder and confusion. Lily nodded solemnly, reaching into her butterfly costume's hidden pocket to extract a worn photograph folded and refolded countless times, a wedding photo of Jack and Caroline, creased and faded, but unmistakable. "My first mom visits me in dreams and told me to keep it safe." Jennifer's hand flew to her mouth, shock mingling with the realization that children sometimes know truths adults cannot explain, that Lily had perhaps always carried awareness of her dual heritage. "Where did you get this, sweetheart?" she asked when she could trust her voice again. "It was in my special blanket when you found me," Lily answered simply, the explanation creating more questions than answers, referencing the baby blanket Jennifer had discovered with the infant left at the hospital, a blanket she'd assumed came from social services during the chaotic aftermath of Caroline's death. Jack reached tentatively toward the photograph, stopping when Lily pulled it back protectively, respecting her ownership of this precious connection to her past. "Your butterfly wings are beautiful," he said instead, changing direction with surprising sensitivity to the child's comfort. Lily beamed at the compliment, momentarily distracted from the photograph as she twirled to display her costume's full effect. "Mommy stayed up all night fixing them," she announced proudly, her statement bringing Jack's attention back to Jennifer with new appreciation for her dedication. Around them, other families gathered for cookies and juice, taking photos and exchanging congratulations, oblivious to the extraordinary reunion occurring in their midst, unaware of the delicate rebuilding of connections that had been severed by death and deception. The ordinary setting made the moment more poignant. 2 weeks after the recital, Jennifer and Lily moved into a renovated brownstone in Detroit's safest neighborhood, security systems disguised as modern amenities, bodyguards positioned as maintenance staff, and neighbors. The transition had been presented to Lily as an adventure, a special house with a garden for butterflies, and a room she could paint any color she chose. Jennifer continued working reduced hours at the hospital, escorted by plainclothes security who maintained discreet distance, her routine seemingly normal despite the extraordinary changes reshaping her life. Jack visited 3 times weekly, building a careful relationship with his daughter through stories, games, and shared ice cream outings to the park. Spring bloomed across Detroit, cherry blossoms and tulips brightening streets that had seen too much harshness. The city's renewal paralleling the fragile family, taking shape in the brownstone with the red door. Lily flourished under the attention of both parents, her natural intelligence finding new outlets through the books and music Jack brought during each visit. The peace shattered on a Tuesday afternoon when Jennifer's phone rang with a hospital security alert, the emergency code sending ice through her veins as she rushed to meet Jack's driver waiting outside. Someone had attempted to access Lily's school records, requesting her pickup schedule and emergency contacts. Jennifer watched through glass as Lily colored peacefully in the next room, oblivious to the danger swirling around her, headphones playing her favorite music while bodyguards positioned themselves throughout the property. "How did they discover the connection so quickly?" she asked, fear sharpening her voice. Jack's expression darkened as he placed a tablet before her, displaying personnel files of hospital administrative staff, including a man whose family connections traced directly to the Coletti organization. "They've had someone inside the hospital system for years," he explained grimly. "They just never had reason to look into you before." The safe house hummed with quiet activity as Jack's security team established perimeters, monitored communications, and prepared contingencies, the invisible machinery of protection operating with practiced efficiency. Jennifer felt simultaneously grateful for the resources protecting her daughter and terrified by their necessity. "We need to leave Detroit tonight," Jack announced, his decision clearly made before their conversation began, the arrangements already in motion as evidenced by the packed suitcases Jennifer noticed in the hallway. "My private plane is fueled and waiting. Flight plan filed for Chicago, but will divert to Montana once airborne." Jennifer's protests died unspoken as she realized the gravity of their situation. Jack Preston didn't run unless the threat warranted such extreme measures, his willingness to temporarily abandon his business empire speaking volumes about the danger facing Lily. Sometimes courage meant retreat rather than confrontation. "Alice is already at the airfield with her nanny," Jack continued, referring to his other daughter, the child he'd raised alone after Caroline's death. "It's time the sisters meet properly, away from threats and surveillance, somewhere they can build a relationship without fear shadowing every interaction." The Montana property appeared on Jack's tablet as he swiped through security footage. A sprawling ranch nestled against mountains, isolated and defensible, with its own landing strip and security systems that would make most military installations envious. The beauty of the landscape contrasted sharply with its fortress-like capabilities. Jack's smile held no warmth as he checked the secure phone that hadn't left his hand since their arrival, messages flowing continuously from his network throughout the city. The Coletti family will be too busy dealing with federal investigations into their tax records and unexpected visits from regulatory agencies to worry about my temporary absence. Jennifer recognized the implications. Jack had activated contingency plans, leveraging legitimate authorities against his enemies through information funneled through untraceable channels, a chess master sacrificing pieces to protect his king and queen. The scale of his influence was both reassuring and terrifying. "Pack only essentials for Lily, things that provide comfort and continuity," Jack instructed, as security alerted him to movement near the property perimeter, his body language shifting subtly into higher alertness. "We leave in 20 minutes through the garage tunnel. Bring her favorite stuffed animal and books." The Montana sky stretched endlessly above the ranch house, stars appearing with breathtaking clarity as Jennifer sat on the porch swing, watching Lily and Alice chase fireflies across the expansive lawn. The girls had bonded with the immediate intimacy of children, their half-sister status irrelevant to the friendship blossoming between them. 2 weeks of relative peace had allowed Jennifer to breathe more easily, the mountain air and distance from Detroit's dangers, creating space for healing conversations with Jack, for building foundations of trust beyond their shared concern for Lily. Their evening talks on the porch had become a ritual, wine glasses and honest words flowing more freely with each passing night. "Alice asked me today if you were going to be her new mother," Jack mentioned casually as he joined Jennifer on the swing, the question hanging between them with unexpected weight. Possibilities neither had acknowledged suddenly taking tangible form. The complexity of their situation extended beyond co-parenting arrangements or security concerns. Jennifer's pulse quickened as she considered implications, the unfamiliar warmth spreading through her whenever Jack entered a room, the way his hand occasionally brushed hers during their conversations, seemingly accidental touches that lingered just long enough to suggest intention rather than coincidence. "The Coletti situation has escalated in Detroit," Jack continued after a moment, changing direction abruptly, his expression tightening as he checked the secure tablet that provided constant updates from his organization. "My absence has forced them into desperate moves, making mistakes we can leverage." Before Jennifer could respond, a familiar car appeared on the property's long driveway, headlights cutting through gathering dusk, the vehicle's arrival unannounced and unexpected. Jack immediately tensed, hand moving instinctively toward the weapon he carried concealed even here in this supposed sanctuary. The car stopped at the security checkpoint as guards approached with cautious efficiency, conversation occurring beyond hearing range before the vehicle was permitted to continue toward the main house. Jennifer called the girls back from the lawn, maternal instinct placing herself between them and the approaching car. Relief flooded Jack's expression as he recognized the driver emerging from the vehicle, his most trusted lieutenant, a man who would only leave Detroit under the most urgent circumstances, whose presence here signaled developments too sensitive for electronic communication. "Take the girls inside," Jack instructed quietly. Jennifer gathered the reluctant children, ushering them toward the kitchen with promises of ice cream sundaes, her anxiety spiking as she caught fragments of intense conversation drifting through the open windows. The lieutenant's voice carried terms like hospital records and positive identification that sent cold fear through her veins. Later that night, after both girls were asleep, Jack found Jennifer in the ranch's library, moonlight streaming through tall windows, illuminating her worried expression as she waited for explanations. "They found Caroline's medical files," he stated without preamble, voice flat with controlled emotion. Jennifer set aside the untouched book in her lap, mentally preparing for revelation she sensed would reshape their carefully constructed arrangement. "What did the files contain?" she asked, already suspecting the answer from Jack's unusually hesitant approach. "DNA test results," Jack answered, pouring himself a drink with uncharacteristically unsteady hands, bourbon splashing slightly over crystal edges. "Caroline was never pregnant. Lily's DNA wouldn't match hers or mine because there was never a biological connection to either of us. She's yours," Jack stated simply, sitting across from Jennifer, the distance between their chairs suddenly representing the gulf of trust threatened by this revelation. "Caroline's final act was arranging for you to find and raise her. Lily is the daughter of your childhood friend, Beth Porter, who died in the same accident that injured Caroline." Memories flashed through Jennifer's mind. Beth's pregnancy announced just before Jennifer left for nursing school, the lost contact during those busy years, the infant left at the hospital with only a blanket, and Caroline's whispered request to protect Lily as she died. The puzzle assembled itself with devastating clarity. "All this time, I thought I was raising Caroline's daughter, your daughter," Jennifer said, voice hollow with shock and betrayal. Years of cemetery visits and secret-keeping suddenly cast in different light. "I believed I was honoring my sister's last wish, preserving her child's connection to her heritage." Jack moved to kneel beside Jennifer's chair, taking her trembling hands in his with unexpected gentleness. "You were honoring Beth's wish, delivered through Caroline," he explained, filling gaps in the story his lieutenant had pieced together. "Beth knew she was dying, and asked Caroline to ensure her baby reached someone who would love her unconditionally. She is still the child Caroline chose to protect with her final breath, still Alice's sister in every way that matters," Jack answered with conviction that brooked no doubt, his thumb gently wiping tears from Jennifer's face. "Family transcends blood. A lesson I learned when I chose to leave my father's criminal dynasty to build something legitimate, something I could be proud for my children to inherit. 1 year later, cherry blossoms drifted across Detroit's renovated riverfront park as Jennifer adjusted Lily's dress collar, the matching outfits she and Alice wore, representing their inseparable bond, despite the absence of biological connection. The girls giggled together, sharing secrets as they awaited the signal to proceed down the flower-strewn path where Jack stood beneath an arch of white roses. The Coletti threat had ended not through violence, but through Jack's methodical dismantling of their organization. Financial records provided to federal authorities, corruption exposed in key city departments, legitimate business interests leveraging influence to isolate and neutralize criminal elements. Detroit breathed easier under the protection of reformed power. "Are you nervous?" asked Beth's mother, Lily's biological grandmother, who had been located and integrated into their expanding family circle, her silver hair catching sunlight as she helped Jennifer with the delicate veil. The elderly woman had embraced this unexpected connection to her daughter's child with grateful tears and unwavering support. Jennifer's gaze moved beyond the intimate gathering to the cemetery visible on the distant hillside. Caroline's resting place marked now with a monument acknowledging her sacrifice, her role in creating this unlikely family through her final acts of love and protection. Some debts could never be repaid, except through living fully the life that had been preserved. "It's time," whispered Alice, now 7 and serious about her responsibilities as both flower girl and ring bearer, her father's solemn nature occasionally emerging through her usually bubbly personality. She took Lily's hand with practiced care. The cousins turned sisters, positioning themselves at the path's beginning. Music swelled gently through the spring air as the small assembly rose, faces turning toward Jennifer with smiles of approval and affection. The journey from hospital nurse to family matriarch complete in this moment of transition. Jack's expression as he watched her approach contained all the confirmation she needed about paths chosen and challenges overcome. The ceremony blended traditions from both their backgrounds, acknowledging the complex journey that had brought them together while celebrating the future they were choosing to build. Jennifer's hospital colleagues stood alongside Jack's legitimate business associates, worlds merging just as their lives had intertwined through circumstances no one could have predicted. "I first met you in a cemetery," Jack began his vows, voice carrying clearly to their assembled guests, his usual commanding presence softened by evident emotion. "You were leaving flowers for my wife, unknowingly beginning a story neither of us could have imagined." Jennifer squeezed his hands gently, encouraging him through uncharacteristic vulnerability. The man who controlled Detroit's legitimate business empire momentarily transparent in his feelings. "You showed me that family is created through choice, not circumstance," she responded, her own vows beginning where his paused. Their kiss sealed promises made not just to each other, but to the children watching with approval, to the extended family they had pieced together from fragments of tragedy and hope. Applause rippled through the gathering as they turned to face their future together, stronger for having navigated the painful truths that had threatened to divide them. The reception unfolded in the botanical gardens adjacent to the park, tables arranged beneath flowering trees, children running between carefully tended paths, as adults shared stories that connected past to present. Caroline's presence was honored through photographs and memories, acknowledgement rather than avoidance healing the final wounds. Jennifer watched as Jack lifted Lily onto his shoulders to reach a butterfly perched just beyond her grasp, Alice offering strategic advice from below, the three forming a tableau of ordinary family joy that belied the extraordinary circumstances of their connection. Sometimes the most precious gifts emerged from darkest moments. Later, as evening approached and guests began departing, Jennifer found herself drawn to the cemetery, viewable from the garden's edge, a moment of quiet reflection amidst celebration. Jack joined her silently, his presence steady and reassuring as they gazed toward Caroline's resting place, illuminated by the setting sun. "She would approve, I think," Jennifer said softly, leaning against Jack's shoulder, finding strength in the partnership they had forged through crisis and revelation. "Of the family we've built, of the legacy we're creating for both girls, of the man you've become in leaving darkness behind. Thank you for following this heartfelt story." If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is what keeps these soul-stirring stories coming to your screens. From our hearts to yours, until next time.